I worked for years in a corner flower shop right next to a funeral home, which in itself made the lonely nights a little more unsettling. When the clock struck midnight, the movement slowed down significantly. Some people came at dawn, always in silence, with faces marked by sadness. Others, in a hurry, just took what they needed, without even looking at the floral arrangements. I was 27 years old at the time and felt the weight of those silent visits. But there was something comforting about the routine of cutting flowers, organizing the arrangements, a kind of meditation that allowed me to forget how lonely and sad the night could be. On that particular night, the rain seemed to let up, the sound of water crashing against the windows, and the wind whispering through the cracks in the roof. We couldn't see anything but the thick fog across the street. Next door, the funeral home was closed, the lights off, and the silence of an empty place seemed to bother more than the storm itself. My colleague Selena, who worked with me, commented in a low tone, "It's going to be a long night." It was not to be expected that anyone would show up on such a night. There was no movement in the street, just a constant rain that seemed to increase by the minute. Selena always talked about the fear she felt of working during the early hours. She didn't like to spend long periods alone, and when we had some company, even without talking, it seemed that the night became more tolerable. I, on the other hand, was already used to loneliness. Even though wakes were not a constant presence, there was always something strange in the air, something that made me question what was going on in the minds of those who came to visit the dead. It was as if the place were a point of intersection between the world of the living and that of those who have passed away. We were sitting at the counter of the store almost silently while I organized some arrangements, still trying to concentrate on what I was doing. The sound of scissors cutting through the flower stems was the only thing that broke the silence. Selena was sitting next to me, telling me a story of when she was a child and had to take care of her little siblings, alone at home during the stormy nights. She said she felt a strange sensation, as if something was watching her from the window, but she could never find anything. "I felt watched," she said, staring into the void. "Whatever was there, I never found out." That's when we heard a light knock on the door, something that took us out of the conversation, and we immediately put ourselves on alert. I went to the entrance, and when I opened the door, I felt an icy wind. A woman dressed completely in black stood in front of us. His face was partially covered by a veil, but his eyes were fixed on me. It was unusual for someone to come to us so late, and even more so with that storm, but I thought it could be someone who was in dire need of flowers for a wake. I opened the door, stepped to the side for her to enter. But as she did so, an unusual cold came in along with her, as if the temperature had dropped drastically the instant she walked through the door. The woman entered without saying a word, with soft, almost imperceptible steps. She was soaked from the rain, but she didn't seem bothered. The veil that covered his face made it difficult to see, but his eyes, hidden under the fabric, naturally penetrated deep into me. The air inside the store became colder and colder, and for a moment the only thing I could hear was the sound of rain pounding on the windows. Selena looked at me, not knowing what to do. It was as if the words had fled from us, and the presence of this woman created a growing discomfort. I still watched her for a few seconds, trying to understand what she wanted. She was a peculiar woman, and there was something strange about her. It was not only the silence that hung in the air, but a feeling that time was stagnating there, as if she were a timeless figure displaced from reality. I forced myself to say, "Can I help you with something?" But the woman did not answer. She just looked at the floral arrangements with a melancholy expression, and then unhurriedly reached the counter. Selena and I looked at each other. That's when lightning cut through the sky and lit up the street. The light revealed more details of the woman, who at that moment seemed even stranger. The rain hadn't wet her feet, and the way she moved seemed almost ethereal, unaffected by the physical reality around her. I couldn't tell if his expression was sad or empty, but something in his eyes told me that there was more behind this encounter than I could comprehend. In the distance, the sound of some city resident's motorcycle echoed through the street, but despite its proximity, she didn't even seem to notice what was happening around her. Suddenly, the woman stopped looking at the arrangements and, with a slow and almost imperceptible gesture, went to the side of the store, where there was a shelf which was filled with withered and shrunken flowers. I didn't know what she wanted, but the simple fact that she was there alone at that time of night didn't seem normal to me. I turned to Selina, looking for some sign, but she was paralyzed, her eyes fixed on the woman, as if hypnotized. The silence was so heavy that I could hear it, choking me in a strange way. I looked once more at the woman, who now seemed completely still, but her eyes were not taking off from me. When I finally spoke, my voice sounded almost like a whisper. "Do you need anything?" The woman didn't answer, but her steps, as she began to move away from the counter, were slow, as if she knew exactly what she wanted. She was reluctant to share. As she walked, the feeling of an indescribable weight increased, as if something was lurking, ready to emerge at the most unexpected moment. Selina then cuts the silence. "Isn't she? Won't you take the flowers?" I didn't know what to think. It didn't look like she had come to buy flowers, but the situation was so disconcerting that I didn't know what to expect. The mood inside the store seemed to change by the second, and I didn't know if the woman was looking for something more, or if she was just another one of the many figures that appeared on rainy nights, bringing with her the weight of loneliness and sadness that hung in the air. Suddenly, without warning, the woman turned abruptly, walking toward the door, and left the store. I stood paralyzed, watching his figure slowly move away, the rain beating on the veil and the wet sidewalk. Selina, without thinking, ran to the door and opened it a little, peeking out as if trying to understand where she was going. The view of the street was limited by the storm, but it was enough to notice that the woman was walking towards the funeral home. I didn't know what to do. Something about that scene disconcerted me, as if I had been a witness to something that should remain hidden. Selina looked at me, her eyes reflecting a mixture of curiosity and fear. "You must be going to a wake," she said, her voice trembling but unable to hide the doubt in her tone. "The funeral home has been closed for hours," I replied, my voice cracking as I tried to make sense of what was happening. The wind caused the rain to splinter against the walls of the store, but the sound of the storm could not drown out the growing sense of discomfort that enveloped me. It was as if the woman had left an invisible mark, something that hung in the air and was yet to be revealed. It was then that, before we could react, we heard something coming from the back of the store. The sound of light and soft but fast footsteps. The kind of sound it doesn't make when you're just walking, but rather when you're trying to move without being noticed. Selina and I looked at each other, and before we could make any move, which stopped. It was as if, for a moment, time had stopped. The silence that followed was dense and heavy, as if something was about to happen. I didn't know what it was, but the air inside the store seemed increasingly charged, as if some presence was approaching without being seen. I looked at Selina, but she was motionless, her eyes fixed in the direction of the sound that had fallen silent. "Selina, did you hear that?" I asked in a whisper, feeling the weight of my own voice in the silence. She just nodded, the expression of dread on her face. Before we could react once more, the light in the store began to flicker, alternating between faint glow and total blackout. The wind intensified, causing the doors of the store to be as if they were about to open silently. Then, when the light finally went out completely, all that was left was darkness. That's when I heard the door of the store open with a loud and abrupt creak, and immediately the sound of wind and rain became more distant, as if we were being isolated in a different space. What happened next was something I will never forget. The woman with her black veil was back. She walked in without saying a word, her eyes now shining almost supernaturally under the veil, as if she had crossed an invisible barrier and was back to fulfill some destiny I didn't understand. The air was cold, heavy with the humidity of the rain and with the presence of that woman who inexplicably seemed to have disappeared, only to return in an even more enigmatic way. The silence lingered as she stood there, staring at me and Selina, as if waiting for something to happen. I could barely breathe. The feeling was that something was about to break reality and consume us. I looked at Selina, but she seemed paralyzed, unable to move or even speak. I wanted to scream, ask her what she wanted, but my throat was tightening. Fear enveloped me like a second skin, and I didn't know how to free myself from it. When I was finally able to move, I took a step back, but before I could open my mouth, I heard a sound coming from outside, something like an old car approaching. The light in the store flashed again, as if it was being controlled by some invisible force. The rain outside seemed to have subsided a bit, but not enough to dispel the feeling that we were trapped in something much bigger than I could understand. The woman, without saying a word, began to walk towards the back of the store, as if she already knew where to go, as if she knew that our destination was there. I followed her movement with my eyes, and a shiver ran down my spine as I realized that she was not heading toward the flower arrangements, as I had hoped, but toward the storeroom. It was a dark place where we kept the flowers. I tried to take a step towards the door, hoping to get out and call for help, but my feet got stuck to the ground as if someone was preventing me from moving. It was like I was a puppet in a game that I didn't understand, but that I knew I didn't want to continue. It was then that suddenly, the light in the store went out again completely, leaving us immersed in darkness. However, the dim light of the street lamp gave us a few arrows of light. I could see a figure moving in the back in the warehouse. She was no longer alone. There was another shadow, an indistinct shape that accompanied his steps. I wanted to scream, but the sound that came out of my mouth was muffled, as if something was suffocating me. Intense heat took over me, but at the same time an icy sensation ran through my hands and face, making everything even more surreal. Not being able to stand the silence and that situation anymore, Selena forgot about her fear and gave a scream that echoed through the store, reverberating in the warehouse. I looked toward the storeroom and saw something I can never describe in words. It wasn't a person. It had a form of black smoke, but it had something that seemed to be more out of this world than anything else. I couldn't understand it, but I knew that it wasn't just about the woman in black. It was as if the store was being invaded by something much older and much more sinister. What was happening there at that moment was beyond our comprehension. The silence that shook Selena's scream was deafening. I was paralyzed, unable to react, my eyes fixed on the darkness that spread over the warehouse. The shadows moved as if they had a life of their own, and a feeling of absolute cold washed over me. Selena seemed equally frozen, her eyes wide and fixed on the void, not knowing where to look or what to do. The sound of our churning breaths filled the air, but somehow it seemed like nothing else existed around us, as if the world had stopped, leaving us alone in that nightmare. It was then that suddenly we heard a faint sound of footsteps coming from the back of the store, almost imperceptible. I looked quickly towards the door to see if it was the woman in black, but it wasn't her. A strange sensation ran through my body, a mixture of collapse and terror. Whatever it was, it seemed to be getting closer and closer, as if it was coming after us. I wanted to run, to escape from that place, but I couldn't move. It was as if some invisible force kept me there, trapped. Then, lost in this sea of fear and affliction, we were taken by the deafening noise of a lightning bolt that fell very close, lightening the store and making it tremble. At that moment, I felt as if my whole body was free. I could move. The sound of footsteps stopped, and the light of the store flashed briefly before stabilizing, lighting the entrance. Standing there with his gaze fixed on us was the policeman who had come to the flower shop the night before, accompanied by another, younger one. They walked in without saying a word, as if they knew exactly what was going on. The older one looked at Selena and at me, and then spoke with a calm that bordered on discomfort. "We're here to make sure everything is okay." But there was something in his voice, something subtle that made me doubt his words. I quickly looked at the warehouse, but there was nothing else. Whatever had happened, it had disappeared as suddenly as it appeared. I wanted to question the police, ask for explanations, ask why they were there if we hadn't called them, but Selena's look asked me not to ask anything. When the youngest returned from the warehouse and said that the place was safe, a shiver ran through my body. I didn't know who to believe. It all seemed like a lie, an illusion created by our panicked mind. But something inside me said that it wasn't that something really was strange that night, something we couldn't understand. When the officers left us, Selena and I looked at each other in silence, speechless to express what we had experienced. It was as if reality had been distorted. as if the line between the world we knew and the unknown had been erased. I wanted it to be just a nightmare, something we could forget. But it wouldn't be possible. Not after everything we have seen, everything we have felt. The storms still bring that fear, that foreboding, that when the rain falls again, that woman or something will come back to remind us of what happened on that strange night. Hit the like button and subscribe to the channel.